welcome to Culture Couch Live. Carly and Marc, welcome. Is this episode 1? Okay, I don't even know really for 2024.
Episode 1 for 2024. How are we going so far?
We're going very well. Now we're down to sort of 3. We're going to mix it up a little bit this year, aren't we? We're going to we've got a couple of different members we're going to introduce at some point. But Marc, Carly, welcome to Culture Couch Live. How are you? Good?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, going well, Roosy.
A question. This is a bit of a Seinfeld. When's too late to say Happy New Year? Murph was strong on the Happy New Year can come at any time that you haven't seen someone. That is absolute garbage.
I'm going January. When it starts to leak into February, it's kind of it's redundant for me.
Yeah, I'm 2 weeks. 2 weeks, so mid-Jan.
So
no, I'll still give it to you in February, but we're done now. We're done, totally done.
We're well and truly done. So no Happy New Year's for anyone, but Happy New Year anyway. First topic, Culture Couch Live. But as we all do, we sort of read articles and emails and all that sort of stuff. And I shot a couple around to you about leading with change and a bit about, there's a Forbes article, there was Headspace, a survey done on Headspace, and there was some stuff from our partners at Insights as well. So I thought that's a good topic because even though there's a lot happening in the world, there always seems to be, Marc, doesn't there? I mean, we're always as leaders, whether that's a change in personnel, whether that's we've changed the building, we're talking about hybrid, but it is an interesting topic, is it, when we think about leading through change? What springs to mind when I throw that at you?
Yeah, and that's an absolute privilege to be back for 2024 edition of Culture Couch. For me, I firstly want to touch on the notion of leading through change rather than change management. I think change management's probably been something that's been used for some time. But the importance here is leading through change, and what is the responsibility of the leader, but also what does leadership mean, and who's responsible for leadership across the organisation when there's change going on. And the reality is there's always going to be change. Whether it's AI right now, whether it's financial crisis, whatever's going on in the workplace, hybrid workforce, there is always going to be change. So we have to be, as a business, be prepared to create a leadership foundation that caters for change, but also just caters for general leadership. So for me, I'll probably start to think about what are the key attributes of leaders and leadership that are going to help us get through change. And really, my mind starts to go to setting expectations, being really, really clear on what the expectations are, but ultimately it's role clarity. So if I'm really clear on what I need to do and I'm really clear what's expected of me, I'm going to be a lot clearer on the direction of the business and also where I sit in that. So no matter what change goes on, I feel a lot happier. And then the other one is just having open conversations. The unsaid is probably the biggest danger of any workforce. And when change happens, the unsaid tends to multiply. And so we really need to be comfortable having open conversations. So that's sort of where my head goes. But ultimately, it's the responsibility of absolutely everyone in the organisation, but it needs to be role modelled and be made very clear by the top of the tree.
It's interesting because one of the frustrating things when I was used to listening to commentators on football, our leaders aren't standing up in big moments. And I was just to think to myself, why do they have to wait for a big moment to stand up? And what I loved about what you said, Marc, if you're a good leader, it shouldn't matter whether it is change or isn't change, Carly, should there? Really, if you've got the characteristics of a good leader, you set yourself up for anything in your workplace because we know anything can happen. But if you're a poor leader, so maybe expand on that, because I think that's a real key. We can sometimes look at incidents and go, oh, they didn't lead well here, they didn't lead well here. But we shouldn't wait for either a really good thing to happen or a really bad thing to happen to be a good leader, should we?
Yeah, it's really interesting because what came up for me when Marc was talking was just around communication skills. And, we hear it so often in every workshop is that, I get taught to be an accountant or a tech coder or a builder, but I don't get taught to be a leader. So how should I communicate? What do people want to hear from me? What do I need to tell them? And I think that's what the leaders really need to focus on. And also the element around transparency. Because in the Headspace article, it talked about leaders feel like they have to be positive all the time and their message always has to be uplifting and making people feel good about being in the office. But to your point, Roosy, I just think people want honesty. Like if there's going to be a structure change, if this team's going to be moving over there and some people might be laid off, we want to know why it's happening, what's happening, and we want to be really clear on what the potential outcomes are. So for me, it's always about communicating really well, and not just at the top, like, oh, okay, cool, so the executive team knows what's happening, but how are we cascading that message down? How are we getting everyone, making sure the whole team's on board and they understand? And I just think it's really important that we're communicating really clearly all the time, not just in times of change or adversity, but all the time.
Yeah, because I think as you said, the headspace alluding to the fact that people are really struggling at the moment. And you're going to struggle if you've got to guess what's happening, Mark, aren't you? If you're always guessing, and that's what you're saying, Carly, which I agree with. It's hard at the moment, obviously, with inflation and interest rates and things like that. So you've got to think that a lot of people are nervous, 24 hours a day, not just when they go to work. So when you go to work, you can't add another layer of complexity. I heard from Mark, he said that, but Carly said something else. But I haven't heard from Roosy. He's the coach. I don't know what's going on. It's a really good point, isn't it? Because those layers at the moment, we can take away some. And that's really all honest communication is taking away some concerns and having some real honest conversations.
Yeah, I probably want to dig into that Headspace report a little bit more too, because I think number one was, I'm just having a look at it here, number one reason for dread at work was stability and unpredictability of what's going on, or instability and unpredictability, which is fine. But second and third were around expectations of workload and expectations of the business on the person. I'd love to know the question, but I'd also love to know the background of the people that answered the survey. But I would almost guess to say that those expectations have never been set by the business. And that's an extension of what you're saying now. I know I said that in my first piece, but we do an activity in workshops, and it's an eye-opening activity for absolutely everyone, but it's genuinely setting expectations around behavior, around performance. And again, it takes away from the unsaid, because if we don't set expectations, to your point, Roosy, we start to make assumptions. And assumptions are almost always incorrect, and they create additional uncertainty. They create fear. They create conflict. But if we don't set expectations, we will never clear that way to really have true understanding of why we're there and what we're there for. And particularly under stress and in times of change, that uncertainty just builds. And so we really need to make sure, again, set expectations, do the exercise, sit down with your people.
Yeah, 100%. I think the other thing which makes it more difficult is this hybrid workplace, Carly. And, because when you're in the office, you're eyeballing people, you're seeing body language. When you finish a meeting, on a Zoom, you click the Zoom button and you're not really sure how everyone's feeling after the meeting. When we finish a meeting, when we're all together, you can read body language. So then I need to go, geez, it looks like Mark's a little bit uncomfortable with that conversation. Let me wander into his office and let me just have another conversation. So we've got to be really careful with that too in this hybrid workplace, which is a form of change also. The other thing I liked about the emails was the insights, because it can't be this one cap fits all, which follows on from this hybrid workplace. It's like the town hall. Everyone's having these town halls and everyone's having these meetings, but we then don't understand each other's personalities, do we? You might need a bit more information. Marc might be a bit he's a red of, so even that part of it is super important when I read some of that stuff from Insights as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating because, we always say when we're in our sessions to assume positive intent. So all these people who are sitting in fear and negativity, they're almost assuming that something bad's going to happen. But we want them to start from a place of saying, I'm doing a good job. We're going okay. Things are okay. Don't assume the negative. But then the different profiles respond so differently to those environments. So when there's change, our blue energy is straight away like, oh, I liked it the way it was. I don't want to change. I don't want to think about it. I'm going to pretend it's not happening. Whereas our yellow energies go opposite and start thinking about great ideas that they can add on. So it's always, and this is in your 25 points, Roosy, like think about each person individually and what they need and how they communicate. And it's relevant to every conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. So Marc, just to round it off, like regardless of what the change is, just a couple of tips. If we've got people listening at the moment going, gee, there is a lot of change going on. I'm a little bit nervous at the moment, and I'm a leader. So let's talk directly to the leaders now. What's your number one tip to go, okay, next Monday, we want you to start this? And I'll ask you the same question, Carly.
Well, I'm going to take two, so I'm going to take a little bit of liberty there because you did say I could have two, but that's so number one.
I did change my mind. So you're right. You caught me on that. Yep.
So number one is sit down with your people and ask them the question: what are they feeling? What are they seeing? What's their concerns? What are their reservations around the future of the business, the direction, alignment to purpose? But sit down with your people and have a conversation. Start to create psychological safety through having open conversations, but make it about them. Because at the end of the day, as a leader, one of the most powerful things you can do is ask questions and listen. And you'll get all the answers you need to, but you've got to take the time to sit down. But also, when you're sitting there listening to what you're hearing, make sure you take their profiles or make sure you take their preference for a certain behavior into account to what they're saying. Because what they're saying is not wrong. What they're saying doesn't misalign to the business. What they're saying is their perception or their view of what's going on. And I think that's a really important piece. And all of that is just essentially wrapped up in empathy. So be empathetic, because you don't know what's going to come back. And if you do, then you can start to formulate really what your people are thinking. So set expectations and show empathy.
Yeah, good. Carly?
Mine is more around the systems. I've just come off a workshop with a team who are remote first, and they are really high performing, and it's because their systems are really built into the way they work. So every quarter they all get together and they have face-to-face for 2 days. So whilst they don't work together, their systems support what they need to do as a team, and their performance is still spot on because they're very strict with their systems. And I just think that people need that face-to-face contact, and teams need that for collaboration and innovation and all of the things we talk about. So don't think that those things aren't important. They're mandatory now in this day and age, and you've got to make sure they happen. So for me, the systems is always really, really priority.
Yeah, I'm going to follow on from that, Carly. You asked me a question off air, but I'm not going to ask the question you asked me, and I'm not going to answer it the way I answered it to you. But I think leaders and CEOs have to think of their role differently. They have to get out of their office, because you've got to, and again, I'm probably talking more of a bigger company than, a startup or something like that, but you've got a CFO, you've got a head of marketing, you've got a head of IT, you've got a head of sales. You let them do the work. The thing that probably I see one of the biggest differences is building relationships in footy clubs. When I went to Melbourne, the first 3 months, I said to the assistants, guys, get out, stay out of your office, talk to the players, understand what they're going through. And you guys have spoken a lot about communication. If we don't know what our staff is going through, I shouldn't have to read Headspace to work out that my staff are in trouble. But how many CEOs rely on surveys because they just don't get out of their office? They don't walk into someone's office. And equally, I think what you said is right, Carl. You have to, regardless of whether you're hybrid or not, you have to get your people together at least once a month, at the very, very least, because magic happens, and we know it because we run the workshops. Magic happens when people get in a room together, and you will save so much time by getting in the room together. And that's, and people go, oh, we can't, I got to do this, I got to do this. How many times, guys, have we been in workshops at the end of the day or the second day when they go, wow, our business kept on running and we got so much done in the last 2 days. Yeah. This has been incredibly valuable. So they're probably my two, just to follow on. And it's interesting, isn't it? Like it's not interesting. It's consistent, isn't it? Around probably my original question, Mark, is don't wait for a change or don't wait for a crisis. Be a good leader.
Absolutely. Healthy culture will create the foundation for absolutely everything and anything that happens in your business. There's no doubt about that.
And I think I'd like to give you an Adam Grant quote because he was in Australia last week. He says the most meaningful way to succeed is to help others succeed. Yep. And so always leads us back to team.
Yeah, back to team. Yep, great conversation. So it's always good to start off the year strong. I think we've won the first round, which is about to start anyway. So we've had a strong start. Hopefully we're happy to take feedback. We're a feedback company. So if anyone wants to shoot some feedback through, We're happy to take feedback. But no, good start. Well done, Mark. Well done, Carly.
Thanks, Roosy. See you next time.
Thanks,
All right,
Rosie.
we'll see
Appreciate having us.
everyone next week on the Culture Couch Live. Thanks, everyone.